And the question was, in the suggestion guided meditation yesterday, of the out breath and then the dropping. So it's just a way to align your attention, which habitually is in the thoughts and the separate sense of the person and the likes and the dislikes and everything that goes along with that. And it just brings more of the attention into the actuality. And the actuality is that one embraces and draws the in-breath, and then one relaxes and drops the attention in the interior of the body, and the spine is the actuality, it's the central channel. And the central channel is that the first emanation. So there's a dropping in the interior of the body. It helps with the eyes, if the eyes also drop and kind of tuck in a little bit. And then a deep relaxation in the interior of the body on the out breath. And then a resting and a gap in that resting. It's an inside job. And then that falls away. So you find your own rhythm. But, it's basically, but it's helpful to have a clarity a little bit of what is actually happening, right? You're drawing the life force, the illumination in, eyes go down, attention, out breath, and rest. So find your own rhythm. But I think it's very important to actually get a sense of what's happening, instead of just like, oh, it's another technique, and I like the technique or I don't like the technique, like we're really good in this culture on techniques. But it's a pointer. At the very best, it's a pointer. Because who you are starts to be alerted or called forth or activated, and then it takes over at a certain point. When the luminosity arises, which is love, which is, the great mother, which is the source of wisdom, this is the movement of it. This is what we are. And then out of that, the dark, still, groundless ground of everything, all form arises as love, as luminosity, as the dynamic aspect of silence. And then it forms itself into the myriad of images and forms. That's the miracle we're living in, right? And then the body formulates through the marriage of the elements. The spirit and the elements are one to become these beautiful bodies. Without exception, whether it was Tibetan, whether it was Hindu, whether it was the shamanic. I worked for many years with a Cherokee woman, and she was bringing the Tibetan and the Cherokee tradition together, Dahana Yawahu, and in their tradition as well. It's always the central channel, always the left and the right. One was ascending, one was descending, and they come together as one thing. So it comes together, and then it flows out, and then it comes together, and it flows out. And again, it's through all traditions. They all describe it in their own language and culture. But it's always the same. We discover always the same. So we're walking around as these gorgeous light bodies. And but most of us, due to training and culture and karmic influences, we just lock in the physicality. So it's helpful if you have this interest or draw, is to look at what all cultures in all times and all places have found. what we actually are. But the alternative systems work with the subtle body. And, that's why they, it's as I was saying yesterday in the Kashmiri yoga, the, subtle body is the first, is the first emanation of form. It's the no self, the emptiness, the dark void, the luminosity. That's the beginning. But the first emanation of form is the light body. The Peruvian, the ancient indigenous people of Peru, so they came down from 14,000 feet. But they came down, I don't know how many years at this point, maybe 10 to 20, to activate the new subtle light body. And they call it human luminous. And I find that too. It feels accurate here. But it's nice to begin to see the actuality of what is, instead of what we've been taught. You just start to move a little bit more into the subtle realms. When this recognition of your nature really starts to dawn, and it takes usually glimpse after glimpse after glimpse after glimpse, and then it almost gathers a kind of momentum, and then it takes over. Or the background comes into the foreground. And you're functioning in a different world. You really are. And the subtle body is an entry into that. So it's expressed over and over and over and over and over and over and over. You just have to see it. And your orientation shifts as well. Then, it just becomes, quote, the norm, is the way it is. And when you start to realize what and who you are, you come back in. But you come back in from another perspective. You come into the essence of who you are that is within this physicality. It's not an escape hatch, but it's a different world. It's a different way of moving and seeing and being. We call it 1 foot in one world and 1 foot in the other world. And you slip back and forth. There's these great beings that are created and designed to assist the human beings, the human species. They don't go away. And I see that lots of times when people very genuinely, they're trying to be here and be grounded and be awake and mindful, and it's also ordinary, and so they dismiss and cut off these sort of multiple experiences that are available to each and every one of us. You don't have to be wired up in a certain way for that to be a part of your world. And yet it's so unimaginably ordinary. It's just here, as it is, in this moment, in this body. No frills. And it's so whole and full and awesomely, unbelievably I don't know what the word is, enough. But in this ordinariness, in this simplicity, in this being what it is that you actually are, is the most ordinary and yet the most unimaginably complete and full way of being. There's this abiding and rooted in and being, something that literally is untouched. It's literally untouched. And the blue sky has clouds, and it has rain, and it has snow, and it has, wind, and everything comes through the blue sky. But the blue sky is not diminished or increased or touched in any way. But when one realizes what one is, then there's a kind of an abiding. It's the space. It's that is untouched. It's more like that luminous quality, that light luminous kind of quality. It's an awake space. Evoking a kind of recognition of that is constant, and that is unbroken, and that is unformed, and that is the source of love, and it's the source of wisdom, it's the source of inspiration, an unimaginable sense of well-being. An unimaginable sense of well-being. And that's where fear doesn't exist. That's where the fear of death goes away. But in that luminous, open space, blue sky, whatever image you want to use, all sorts of images and concepts and experiences, and it's more of an abiding, a being. And so the prominent experience is well-being, constancy, an open, loving inclusion, a curiosity, kind of a interest in what is. And when you come back to what you are, when that awakens and becomes a prominent way that one lives, it's worth everything. It's worth everything. Then the passing show, in whatever form that it takes, still happens. And in many ways, it's sort of like, kind of an interest and a delight and, being a part of. But there isn't like a collapsing into that particular image, because the mind can grab onto that. It can't grab onto pure awareness. It can't. The whole thing is to bring the unconscious to the conscious. But you don't stop there. The next is seeing it for what it is, as this open, alive, awake, loving, inclusive space that includes everything, permeates everything, is the creator and also the destroyer. Death and birth are both within this. And then these images, they arise and they present themselves to be made conscious. And then the space, which is dynamic, burns and resolves and dissolves those patterns. So then you become free of the patterns, not identified or managing the patterns. Big difference.